They say kindness costs nothing. But for Ethan Carter, it was the price of pride, fear, and ultimately, his redemption. The neon glow of the gas station flickered against the dark sky, casting long shadows over the near-empty parking lot. The cold wind carried the scent of gasoline and desperation as Ethan Carter, a single father, stared at the fuel pump screen. $2.73 left in his bank account. He exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers against his forehead. His little boy, Jake, sat in the passenger seat of their aging sedan, wrapped in a tattered hoodie, clutching his toy basketball. "Dad, are we gonna make it home?" he asked, his voice small, uncertain. Ethan forced a smile, though his heart clenched. "Yeah, buddy. We always do." But even he didn't believe it. The gas nozzle clicked uselessly as he swiped his card. Declined. Not even enough for a single gallon. His fingers clenched around the handle, frustration bubbling beneath his exhausted exterior. A black SUV pulled up a few pumps away, its tinted windows reflecting the dim station lights. Someone stepped out, tall, commanding, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and sneakers that seemed out of place at a rundown gas station. Ethan didn't look up. He was too lost in the cruel math of survival. But fate was about to change everything. Ethan Carter gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the fuel pump. The cold seeped through his worn-out jacket, but the chill inside him ran deeper. This wasn't how life was supposed to go. Once he had dreams, big ones. A promising college basketball player, he had the speed, the vision, the hustle. Scouts whispered about scholarships. He could almost hear the echo of sneakers squeaking against polished gym floors, the roar of a crowd, the feeling of soaring toward the basket. But dreams don't pay hospital bills. Jake's mother, Anna, had been diagnosed with leukemia before their son's first birthday. Treatments drained everything. Their savings, their energy, their hope. Ethan dropped out of college to work double shifts at a construction site. By the time he clocked out at night, his muscles ached so badly he could barely hold Jake in his arms. Anna fought hard, but cancer fought harder. She was gone by the time Jake turned 4. Ethan never recovered, not emotionally, not financially. He did everything he could to keep a roof over Jake's head. Odd jobs, late shifts, sacrificing meals so his son could eat. The weight of fatherhood sat heavy on his shoulders, but he never let Jake see the cracks in his armor. The basketball sitting in the back seat was the only remnant of the dream Ethan once had. Jake loved the game just like his dad. He practiced in scuffed-up sneakers, dribbling on cracked pavement, pretending to be a star. Ethan wanted more for him, a future, an opportunity. But dreams needed fuel, and right now he couldn't even afford a gallon of gas. A deep voice suddenly broke through his thoughts. "Need some help?" Ethan turned, his heart skipping a beat. The stranger by the pump looked oddly familiar. Ethan's throat tightened as he glanced at Jake in the passenger seat. His son had fallen asleep, his tiny fingers still wrapped around the basketball. He didn't know that his dad had less than $3 to his name. Didn't know that the fridge at home was empty, that the overdue rent notice sat crumpled in the glove compartment, or that Ethan was one more missed shift away from losing the only job keeping them afloat. He ran a hand through his unkempt hair and stared at the card-declined message on the gas pump. What now? He had no one to call, no safety net. His last paycheck was gone, eaten up by groceries and the electricity bill. His boss had cut his hours, and the temp job he was supposed to start next week? Canceled. Ethan clenched his jaw. He could walk inside, ask the clerk if they had a pay-it-later policy, if that was even a thing. Maybe beg for a few dollars from a stranger, but the thought made his stomach churn. He wasn't that guy. He'd worked hard his whole life, done everything right, but life kept throwing punches he couldn't block. The night felt heavier, the world colder. Jake stirred in the seat, his voice groggy. "Dad? We home yet?" Ethan exhaled sharply. "No, buddy. Not yet." A deep voice cut through the silence. "Yo, man. You need a hand." Ethan turned. The stranger stood by the pump, casual but commanding. Hood up, hands in his pockets, but something about him felt different. And then it clicked. No, freaking. Wait, The man standing before him was Michael Jordan. Ethan blinked, convinced his exhaustion was playing tricks on him. Michael Jordan? Here? At some rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere? That was impossible. But the way the man moved, the unmistakable confidence, the towering frame, the casual ease, it had to be him. The stranger studied Ethan for a moment, his gaze sharp yet warm. Then he gestured toward the gas pump. You good? Ethan's instinct was to say yes, to pretend everything was fine. That's what he always did. Push through, make it work, survive. But standing there, with an empty gas tank, a sleeping son, and the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders, the words caught in his throat. He glanced away, ashamed. Just a little short on gas, he admitted, barely above a whisper. Jordan didn't react immediately. Instead, he nodded, as if he understood something deeper than Ethan had said. He knew that look, the look of a man trying to hold it all together. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a crisp $100 bill and held it out. This should cover it. Ethan hesitated. Pride, fear, hope, all tangled in his chest. I can't take that, he stammered, shaking his head. Jordan smirked. You can. And you will. He slid the bill onto the gas pump. Think of it as an assist. Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't just money. This was a lifeline. A moment of grace in a world that had given him nothing but struggle. And then, just as the reality of it all started to settle in, Michael Jordan did something that would change Ethan's life forever. Ethan's fingers hovered over the crisp bill on the gas pump. His pride screamed at him to refuse, but his empty wallet, and the little boy sleeping in the car, begged him to take it. He looked up at the stranger again, studying him in the dim station lights. Was this real? Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan, stood there, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that wasn't pity, just understanding. Ethan exhaled. Look, man, I appreciate it, but I don't want a handout. His voice wavered between gratitude and reluctance. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Who said anything about a handout? He leaned casually against the pump. You ever play ball? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I used to, before. He cut himself off, shaking his head. It's been a long time. Jordan smirked. Figured. You've got that look. Like a guy who used to chase dreams but got too busy surviving. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong. Jordan gestured toward the car. That your kid? Ethan nodded. Jake. He's everything. Jordan nodded slowly, as if piecing something together. Bet he loves basketball too. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. Yeah. Thinks he's gonna make the league one day. Jordan chuckled. Good. Someone's gotta. His tone softened. But kids don't just need dreams. They need to see their parents believe in something too. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. A mix of realization and something dangerously close to hope. Jordan pushed the bill toward him again. Firmer this time. Let me tell you something, man. Everyone needs a little help now and then. Take the damn assist. Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was being seen. And so, he took it. Ethan stood frozen. The $100 bill crumpled in his trembling fingers. Take the assist. The words echoed in his head, but something inside him resisted. He wasn't the kind of guy who took handouts. He was the guy who figured things out, who sacrificed, who pushed through, who took every hit life threw at him and kept standing. Taking help, especially from a stranger, felt like admitting he couldn't handle it. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. I don't know, man. His voice cracked, laced with something deeper than hesitation. Fear. Jordan studied him, his expression unreadable. Then, in a quieter tone, he said, You think I got here on my own? Ethan looked up, caught off guard. What? Jordan sighed, rubbing his chin. People see the rings, the fame, the money, but they don't see the nights I almost quit. They don't see my mom working extra shifts, my coaches believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. He shrugged. I didn't make it alone. No one does. Ethan clenched his jaw. The weight of years of struggle pressed against his ribs. The sleepless nights, the missed meals, the feeling of being trapped in a life that never let up. And beneath all that, the guilt. Guilt that he wasn't enough for Jake. Guilt that he had let go of his dreams. Guilt that, no matter how hard he worked, it never seemed to be enough. His grip on the bill tightened. He exhaled sharply. I don't know how to do this. Jordan gave him a knowing look. Then maybe it's time to learn. For the first time, Ethan didn't have a comeback. Ethan let out a shaky breath, staring at the bill in his hands. The gas station lights buzzed overhead, the only sound besides the occasional hum of passing cars. How had his life come to this? Michael Jordan watched him, patient but firm. Then, with a smirk, he crossed his arms. Tell you what, how about a trade? Ethan blinked. A trade? Jordan nodded. I help you out tonight, and in return, you do something for me. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What kind of something? Jordan leaned against the gas pump, thoughtful. You ever coach? Ethan frowned. No, I played. I was good. But I gave that up a long time ago. Jordan scoffed. Yeah? So what? Talent doesn't just disappear. I know a guy, he runs a community center, helps kids get off the streets, keeps them focused. He's always looking for guys who know the game. Guys who get what it's like to fight for something. Ethan stiffened. A job? A real opportunity? Jordan tapped the gas pump. You can't just be about survival forever, man. Your kid's watching. Show him something better. Show him what it means to believe again. Ethan swallowed hard. The weight of the moment settled over him. This was more than money, more than gas. This was a door, one he hadn't even known existed. He looked at his reflection in the car window, at Jake curled up in the seat, dreaming of a future his father had stopped believing in. His fingers tightened around the bill. Then, slowly, he looked up at Jordan and nodded. Okay. For the first time in years, he felt like he was about to start living, not just surviving. Ethan stood there, heart pounding, the weight of the decision pressing against his chest. His fingers toyed with the bill, the edges crumpling beneath the pressure of his grip. Could he really do this? A part of him still resisted. Taking help wasn't in his nature. He had spent years fighting alone, convincing himself that if he just worked harder, pushed further, he could pull himself out of this. But the truth was, he was sinking. He looked at Jake through the window, his son's small frame curled up in sleep, his little basketball tucked under his arm. Jake believed in him, trusted him to figure things out, to lead the way. And suddenly, a memory surfaced. Anna, holding Jake in the hospital, her voice weak but steady. Promise me, Ethan, you'll let people in. You don't have to do this alone. He had broken that promise. His throat tightened, and his chest ached with something close to shame, but also relief. He exhaled sharply, the tension melting just enough for him to let go. Ethan nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. Okay. The word felt foreign but freeing. Jordan grinned, as if he had expected this moment all along. Good. Now let's fill up that tank. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He handed the bill to the clerk, watching as the numbers on the gas pump finally started climbing. For the first time in years, it wasn't just fuel in his car, it was hope. And just like that, his life was no longer standing still. The rhythmic hum of fuel rushing into the tank filled the quiet night air. Ethan leaned against the car, watching the numbers climb past $5, $10, $1.20. Felt surreal. Just minutes ago he had nothing. Now his car had gas, and for the first time in a long while he had a direction. Michael Jordan stood nearby, arms crossed, his eyes scanning Ethan, not just seeing him, but understanding him. Ethan flexed his fingers, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease just slightly. The weight of constant survival had been so heavy for so long that he hadn't even realized how much it had bent him. But now, for the first time in years, he was standing a little straighter. He glanced down at his sneakers, worn, scuffed, splitting at the seams, a reminder of every step he had taken, every sacrifice he had made. But now he had somewhere to go. The gas pump clicked, signaling a full tank. A full tank. When was the last time he had seen that? Ethan exhaled, feeling something unfamiliar creep into his chest. Hope. Jordan slapped a hand on his shoulder. You good? Ethan nodded, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, I think I am. From the passenger seat, Jake stirred, rubbing his eyes. Dad? We home yet? Ethan looked at his son, then back at Jordan. Maybe, for the first time, they actually were. Jordan smirked. Good. Now go get that kid home. And be at the community center tomorrow. Ethan swallowed hard, nodded. As he pulled out of the gas station, something had changed. He was no longer just driving, he was moving forward. A week later, Ethan stood in the center of the Southside Community Gym, gripping a whistle in his hands. The sound of bouncing basketballs echoed around him as dozens of kids ran drills, laughing, pushing themselves, dreaming. And he was right there with them. The first day had been rough. Self-doubt, old wounds, the fear that he wasn't good enough. But as soon as he stepped onto the court, something clicked. The love for the game, the love he thought was gone, was still there, waiting for him. Jake was already on the sidelines, his eyes wide with excitement as he watched his dad not just survive, but thrive. Michael Jordan had kept his word. This wasn't a handout. This was a second chance. Word spread quickly. Parents came by to watch, to thank him. A few local businesses started pitching in, donating sneakers, gear, even funding scholarships for the kids. And then, one evening, as Ethan was locking up the gym, a familiar voice spoke from behind him. Told you everyone needs an assist. Ethan turned. Jordan stood there, arms crossed, smirking. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. You really don't do small gestures, do you? Jordan laughed. Nah, man. Big plays change the game. He nodded toward the gym. And you? You're making him now. Ethan looked back at the court, where kids were still practicing under the flickering gym lights. Once he had thought his story was over. But now, it was just beginning. The gas station struggle, the sleepless nights, the weight of failure. They hadn't broken him. They had led him here. And for the first time in years, Ethan Carter wasn't just surviving, he was winning. The gym was packed. Parents, kids, and community members filled the bleachers, cheering as the final game of the youth tournament played out. On the court, Jake dribbled the ball, his tiny hands guiding it with the same determination his father once had. 10 seconds left. Tie game. Ethan stood on the sidelines, watching his son, watching himself in a way. The same fire, the same hunger. But this time, Jake had something Ethan hadn't. A father who believed in him. Jake hesitated for a second, looking to his dad. Ethan met his eyes and gave him a small nod. Jake took a deep breath, crossed over his defender, and launched a perfect shot. The ball arced through the air. Swish. The crowd erupted. Jake had won the game. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes as his son sprinted toward him, arms wide. He scooped Jake up, holding him tight. Jake grinned. Did you see that, Dad? Ethan laughed, his voice thick. Yeah, buddy. I saw. From the stands, a familiar deep voice called out. Nice shot, kid. Ethan turned to see Michael Jordan, watching with a knowing smile. Jake's eyes widened. No way. Jordan walked over, ruffled Jake's hair, then looked at Ethan. Told you. You just needed an assist. Ethan exhaled, feeling something deep inside him finally settle. The struggles, the failures, the years of doubt, they had led him here. And for the first time in forever, he wasn't afraid of what came next. He extended his hand. Jordan clasped it. The crowd cheered, but all Ethan could hear was his heartbeat. Steady, strong, and finally at peace. Later that night, long after the cheers had faded and the gym had emptied, Ethan sat alone on the bleachers, watching Jake dribble on the court, lost in his own world. For years, Ethan had believed that life was just about survival, about taking the hits and standing back up, alone. But tonight, watching his son play, watching a new generation dream without fear, he realized something he had never allowed himself to believe. No one makes it alone. Not Michael Jordan. Not himself. Not even Jake. They all needed someone. Someone to believe in them, to remind them that failure isn't the end, just a detour. He pulled the worn-out bill from his pocket, the same $100 bill Jordan had given him that night at the gas station. He had kept it not out of necessity, but as a reminder. A symbol. A reminder that the smallest act of kindness, the smallest moment of belief, could change the trajectory of someone's life. He stood, walking toward Jake, who was practicing the same shot he had made earlier. "Hey, buddy," Ethan called. Jake turned, dribbling to a stop. "Yeah, Dad." Ethan smiled. "Want to know a secret?" Jake nodded eagerly. Ethan crouched down, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "It's not about making every shot. It's about taking them, even when you're scared you'll miss." Jake thought for a moment, then nodded. "Like how you took yours?" Ethan chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Yeah, kid. Exactly like that." For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter wasn't just moving forward. He was leading, and he would never look back. The streetlights flickered outside the gym as Ethan and Jake walked toward their car. The air was cool, crisp, but for the first time in years it didn't feel heavy. Jake bounced his basketball with each step, his energy endless despite the long day. "Dad, do you think I could really make it to the NBA someday?" Ethan glanced down at his son, seeing not just a dreamer, but a fighter. He smiled. "I think if you work hard, stay focused, and never give up, yeah, I do." Jake grinned. "Like Michael Jordan?" Ethan chuckled. "Like you." As they reached the car, Ethan paused, looking back at the glowing gym behind them. He thought about the kids inside, the ones who had just started believing in themselves, about the parents who now had a safe place for their children to grow, and about the man who had given him an assist when he needed it most. Ethan took the $100 bill from his pocket one last time. With a deep breath, he walked over to the donation box by the entrance and slid it in. Full circle. As he turned back to his son, Jake was already buckled in, waiting. Ethan slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The gas tank was full, but so was something else, his purpose. He gripped the wheel and smiled to himself. For the first time in a long time, the road ahead didn't feel uncertain. Felt wide open. Jake looked over. "Where are we going, Dad?" Ethan exhaled, eyes on the road. "Forward." And with that, they drove off, toward a future finally worth chasing.